Good evening, New York, and welcome to everyone tuning in from around the world. My name is Miklos. I'm the Executive Director of the Horological Society of New York, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here to our March meeting. Let's begin with a few announcements. After tonight's lecture, we will have our normal Q&A session, where you can ask questions by using Zoom's Q&A feature. Also for tonight, we'll try something new for Q&A. If you'd like to ask your question live using your microphone, just raise your hand in Zoom. I'm happy to announce that two new sponsors have joined HSNY, Breguet and Phillips Auctioneers. HSNY thanks our sponsors for their generous support. Recently, HSNY has started offering new membership benefits in the form of complimentary magazine subscriptions. HSNY members can now enjoy subscriptions to Hodinkee, GMT, and Europa Star magazines. If you are an HSNY member with a recurring membership, you can customize your opt-in preferences on our website. We look forward to continuing to announce new membership benefits. Stay tuned, one new complimentary magazine subscription will be announced this week, and you may be able to guess which magazine it is by the pixelated image on the slides. Today, HSNY welcomes two new trustees to its board, Mark Armanante and Daniel Moonkai. These new trustees join HSNY's leadership group in shaping the future of America's oldest watchmaking guild. Applications for HSNY's 2021 financial aid programs are open through tonight. 35 applications have been received so far, and the recipients will be announced in April. If you are a watchmaking student considering applying, you still have time to email your application to HSNY tonight before midnight. Now, on to tonight's lecture. Ann Miklos is a retired NASA engineer with 33 years of experience. She was with the Space Shuttle program for 112 launches, including leading the Space Shuttle Columbia's reconstruction effort. She completed her engineering career with NASA's Launch Services Program with 38 launches, including multiple science missions on SpaceX, Atlas V, Delta II, and Pegasus rockets. Now, in her spare time, she's capturing various moments of time in space on her website, www.blueplanetphotos.org. Tonight, Ann will discuss the general history of watches in spaceflight, as well as a personal story about a watch that flew on a space shuttle. I am pleased to welcome Ann Miklos to lecture at the Horological Society of New York. Take it away, Ann.
Hi, and good evening, everybody. I'm so glad you were able to attend. I wish I was floating on the International Space Station, but you get to enjoy the backdrop of the cupola, which is the windows of the world for the space station. Next slides, please. Nick, I'd like to thank you for the introduction, and it has been an incredible career. I was a thermal protection system engineer for the Space Shuttle Columbia for 20 missions, was the lead engineer for that vehicle, and then ended my career on the Space Shuttle program working on as a program or a project manager for all the upgrades to the thermal protection system on the Space Shuttle. There were 25,000 tiles on the shuttle, so there was a lot to be done after every mission. At the end of the Space Shuttle program, like Nick said, I went to another program called the Launch Services Program. It's another NASA program that buys rides on commercial rockets, like Nick had said, at SpaceX, Atlas rockets, Delta. You may be familiar with one of our launches. We launched the Mars rover that just landed a couple of weeks ago. We had that launch back on, let's see, that was July 30th of last year. And of course, the rover took about 8 months to get to its destination. So pretty proud to be a part of that as well. But we're not here to hear about my career. I just want to now, next slide, please, talk a little bit more about watches. Necessarily, how watches have played an important role in space flight in history, as well as I will be telling a personal story of a watch that I also had the opportunity to be flown as a gift on Space Shuttle Columbia. But to start with the history of watches in space, of course, space flight is a very demanding test of which a watch can experience. Of course, during ascent of a rocket, the watch and also the astronaut can see up to approximately 3 Gs of gravitational forces being applied to the body as well as the watch. So the watch has to be designed for those pressures. Also, when the shuttle and/or capsule is entering back in the Earth's atmosphere, depending on the angle of attack, it can also receive a high amount of forces and as well as the astronaut. So that the astronaut, of course, has a gravitational suit on, but the watch, of course, has to be designed in order to be able to sustain and survive those environments. Next slide, please. So the first watch that actually flew by an American astronaut was a Swiss timepiece. The timepiece was a Heuer stopwatch worn by astronaut John Glenn when he became the first American astronaut to orbit the planet on February 20th, 1962 on a Friendship 7 mission. You can see below the picture of the watch, and it's more of a stopwatch. So there's a little bit of debate if this is, it's known as more as the first timepiece because it's not, and I'll leave this for you to decide if it's truly a watch or not. But for this case in point, we're just calling it a timepiece. Next slide, please. However, the first wristwatch to actually fly was another Swiss piece that belonged to Breitling. And this was the name of the watch was a 24-hour Navitimer worn by Scott Carpenter. And his launch was approximately 3 months later after John Glenn's from the Kennedy Space Center as well. Now, Mr. Carpenter had been also one of the original 7 astronauts chosen for NASA for the Project Mercury program, and he was also the backup astronaut to John Glenn. It was Mr. Carpenter's idea to have the Navitimer watch to be flown by him. And so NASA was able to contact that company who developed the model that he wore. Unfortunately, the model missed one design criteria, and that was being waterproofed. So after his mission, as you know, those missions, the capsule landed in the Atlantic Ocean. And upon landing, it was up to the astronaut to open up the hatch and wait in a survival raft to be picked up by an aircraft carrier. Unfortunately, the seawater, of course, got the watch wet and the timepiece stopped working. So lessons learned to always have a good requirement check when you're doing a design. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move to the Apollo program. And of course, the Apollo watches were a little bit different because not only were they surviving the space flight going into space, and of course, entry into Earth's atmosphere, these astronauts were also going to be doing a spacewalk on the moon. So that means they would be leaving the pressurized cabin and of course then going into the vacuum of space. So the watch had to be designed for that. It also had to be designed for particular temperature fluctuations as well, due to the weather or temperature on the moon. And of course, just it had to be waterproofed, learned from the previous program. But one interesting note is the Omega Speedmaster, which was the first watch to be certified by NASA for spacewalks, is still the only watch that is certified. So anytime for spacewalks. So anytime that you see or hear about an astronaut recently doing a spacewalk on the International Space Station, if they're wearing a watch on that spacewalk, it would be an Omega Speedmaster. Next slide, please. So an interesting tidbit about the first watch on the moon, which of course was the Apollo 11 mission. Buzz Aldrin, of course, was the second man to walk on the moon, but his Omega watch was actually the first watch on the moon. Unfortunately, Neil Armstrong's watch misfunctioned prior to him getting ready to leave the lunar capsule. So he chose then to leave the watch back in the capsule. So when he took his first step, the watch was in the capsule. So Buzz Aldrin ended up getting that honor of having the first watch to be worn actually in space. However, the watch that Buzz Aldrin wore never went on public display, and I found this very interesting. Part of the protocol after that mission was there were certain items that were going to be declared as artifacts and be sent to the Smithsonian Museum. Of course, the watches were considered those artifacts. And at that time, Buzz Aldrin went ahead and packaged the watch and was getting it ready to send to the Smithsonian. Unfortunately, the Smithsonian never received the watch. So that watch has never been recovered or found. So but we do have, of course, Neil Armstrong's first with his watch. Next slide, please. So with the Apollo program ending in 1972, that was ushering in the beginning of a new program that started in 1981, which was the Space Shuttle program. Now, the Space Shuttle program was different than the Apollo program, where the key was to have a reusable spacecraft that would orbit the Earth doing different type of scientific and medical research, as well as in the beginning of the program, they did some Department of Defense. But with that being said, the roles of watches kind of took a different meaning. As you can see in the picture here, that the crew is wearing, some of them are wearing multiple watches. One of those watches were standard for, in this case, the crew was doing for multiple experiments. So they all had to have the same set of watches to run those experiments by. And then the other watches that they're wearing are more their personal watches. Now, with that being said, one of the things that kind of developed from the Space Shuttle program was that the astronauts, because it's a bigger vehicle, you could carry a little bit more payload. So the astronauts were each allotted certain things that they could privately fly for family or friends and give it back as gifts for them once they returned back from Earth or from space. And watches ended up being one of those nostalgic pieces that was a very sought after item to be flown, because of course, if you fly a watch in space, it's something that you, if you choose, you could wear it every day, and it has a very significant meaning. To me, it just is carrying on the history of what watches have always been for significant, as a gift for a significant achievement. Now, with that being said, I had an opportunity for a watch to be flown on the space shuttle as well. It flew on a mission with Columbia, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so let me backtrack and tell you how all this started. Next slide, please. So as I had said, I was the lead engineer for the thermal protection system for Columbia. And with that being said, when we were getting ready to prepare Columbia's 20th mission, when I say we, of course, our team and the whole Kennedy Space Center crew of engineers, technicians, and qualities personnel, I had a unique experience because I had a personal relationship with one of the crew members. His name was Dave Brown, and I was dating Dave prior to his assignment to this mission of Columbia. Unfortunately, we ended up parting as friends a few months prior to the launch, but we remained very close friends up and through the mission. But prior to the mission, my birthday was coming up, and Dave had told me he was sending me my birthday present to Connecticut, where I was visiting my mother at the time. And I was all excited because I was wondering what he was going to send me. So the box finally arrived, and I finally go ahead, open the box up. Next slide, please. And I see it's this Tourneau watch box, but it's empty. So my New Yorker kicked in and said, okay, who stole the watch? Then I realized there's a little note in there that says, help me, I'm being held hostage aboard the space shuttle. So I realized that Dave had he was going to have this watch stowed on the middeck and have it flown in space, which I was completely humbled by that gesture. So next slide, please. So with that being said, now we have to get the orbiter ready so it can fly in space, knowing that my watch is somewhere in that shuttle. So kind of just going through a quick sequence. In the top left-hand corner is a picture of the Space Shuttle Columbia rolling out of the orbiter hangar, where she normally spends 4 to 5 months, depending on the mission, getting ready for the next flight. She gets rolled out of that hangar, and then in the top right-hand picture is a picture of the vehicle then moving into the vehicle assembly building, which is the same building that all the Apollo rockets went into to get stacked for flight. So in this case, the shuttle on the bottom center picture, you can see the shuttle is now lifted up. It is on a sling, and it gets lifted about 25 stories up in the air and goes into another bay. Next slide, please. There we go. Where the orbiter will attach to the external tank, which is the brown tank, and then the 2 solid rocket motors. And the external tank, of course, is the gas tank for the 3 main engines, and the 2 solid rocket boosters are pretty much so what help get the shuttle up to the speed it needs to make orbital velocity. So with that being said, if you go to look at the bottom left-hand picture, you can see a picture of Columbia rolling out of the vehicle assembly building. You can see that the louver doors are partway open, and that is approximately the height that the shuttle needs, obviously, to get out. But for the Apollo rockets, those louver doors would be opened all the way to the top. Next we have is, of course, Space Shuttle Columbia at the launch pad. She's getting ready for flight. And what we would be doing at this time is all the last minute checkouts to the orbiter, making sure that everything's hooked up right, because the next thing that's going to happen is launch day. Next slide, please. So this is always a very exciting day in any space flight. And as tradition, we always have a little ceremony of the crew leaving the crew quarters. They're always very happy, excited to get on the vehicle, and they're getting ready to go in their Astro van, which is an Airstream van, especially equipped for the astronauts, to take them out to the launch pad. So with that being said, at this point now, I'm back working in the Launch Control Center on console to help out with the launching of the vehicle. So again, it's unique knowing it's personal and professional, and knowing that my watch is on that shuttle. Next slide, please. And then the launch. There is nothing like a shuttle launch. I don't know how many of you have been able to attend one before, but the sound of the solid rocket motors and the main engines, you can just feel the sound just going through your body. It's an experience. Once you witness it, you'll never forget. You'll never forget. But the main thing was here that our astronauts and our vehicle are off on a 17-day mission, orbiting around the Earth, doing multiple life science experiments. Next slide, please. Now, part of my job at that time as well was to review the ascent videos of the orbiter. The thermal protection system is a very fragile system, so I always want to ensure that there was no type of strikes, debris strikes, that would come off and maybe endanger the shuttle. Well, in Columbia's case, there was a debris strike, and we did see it. And you can see the area here on the, excuse me. Not time to get a tickle in my throat. The area on the slide that shows the area that looks like a piece of foam from the brown external tank came off and hit. Now, unfortunately, this was the best view that we had of the strike, of the debris hit. So it was difficult to actually understand where that debris strike was. But at this time, the engineers in Houston that were in charge of determining the safety of the space shuttle were doing all their analysis to ensure that what they believed was everything was going to be okay, and that the orbiter would be able to have a safe entry back into Earth's atmosphere. Next slide, please. But in the meantime, of course, the mission went on. The crew were working in two different teams. They were working pretty much so science experiments around the clock. But of course, during that time, if they had any free time, they're always looking out the window and taking pictures and just enjoying that gorgeous view of Earth. I would be getting emails from Dave and excuse me, Dave in space. And it was always interesting to find out what he thought about being in space. I think one of the favorite stories was that how I can take this pencil and put it down, and it's going to stay on the table. If I put it down in space, it's just going to go floating away. So everything you have to either put down in a good position or have it Velcroed. So just little things like that that you just take for granted that happen on Earth doesn't happen in space. So it was a very successful mission up to that point from a scientific standpoint. Next slide, please. So finally, after 17 days in space, the NASA team has gone ahead and certified that the orbiter, even with the debris strike, is acceptable for coming in and coming back into Earth's atmosphere. Now, that's, of course, from my system standpoint, thermal protection system, that's when our system works, because when the shuttle's coming back into the Earth's atmosphere, it's seeing very extreme temperatures. The orbiter can see up to about 2,700 degrees on the shuttle, which is pretty much caused by the speed of the shuttle, which it starts entry at 17,500 miles per hour. And then of course slows down to a landing speed of just under around 200 miles per hour. But during that point of when it's coming into the Earth's atmosphere, that's the point of when the shuttle really begins to heat up. There's plasma gas going around the shuttle, and that plasma gas can be up to about 10,000 degrees. So obviously, this is the time where we're always concerned about, is our system going to be working properly? And that's why we always do our checks and balances. So at this day, I was on the runway at the Kennedy Space Center with my team of engineers. We were set up in a convoy to be ready to go out to the landing field upon the shuttle landing. And about 45 minutes after landing, go out and inspect the shuttle, see the tiles, and then meet the crew. Approximately it was interesting because one of the tall tale signs of landing are twin sonic booms. We'll hear those approximately 5 minutes prior to landing, and it's the shuttle breaking the sound barrier at the nose cone and the wing leading edge. We never heard those sonic booms. And unfortunately, the time that she was supposed to land, we didn't have a shuttle. Next slide, please. And that's where we found out that the Space Shuttle Columbia and her crew broke up over East Texas, about 16 minutes from landing from the Kennedy Space Center. The shuttle and the crew were lost, and the debris scattered all over a certain part of Eastern Texas. Wasn't an ending that any of us expected to see. It was very emotional. Losing the crew, as well as the shuttle that I'd worked on for so long, was very difficult. But one of the things that we do is you have to figure out what happened. What happened so that we could fix the problem and then move on. Next slide, please. So that's what we ended up doing. We ended up, NASA came up with a team out in East Texas that started collecting, of course, had to first find the astronauts, and then start collecting the debris from the shuttle. Now, at this time, I was asked by the chief engineer if I would help lead up the reconstruction of the thermal protection system, since I had worked on Columbia so long. And he knew my personal position with the crew as well, but honestly, there was no other place, or item or thing I'd rather be working on than trying to help solve that problem. So with a great team of people, we spent the next 3 months out at a hangar back at the Kennedy Space Center, basically reverse engineering the shuttle and trying to understand, with all the clues that were left on the tiles, what happened. And after months, we finally came up with a solution that, in the picture on the lower right-hand side, there was, remember that debris strike we talked about? Well, there was debate of where that debris strike hit, and it actually hit on the wing leading edge. And it hit in a location on the wing leading edge that basically saw the highest temperatures and had the highest pressure during the orbiter's entry into Earth's atmosphere. So all those hot gases I was talking about pretty much so went into the wing leading edge and kind of started burning the vehicle from the inside, which caused the vehicle to break up. So to find that out, though, it took a lot of time, a lot of teamwork from people all over the world trying to help us solve this problem. But what about the watch? Next slide, please. So with working on the reconstruction, I also was going to funerals of the astronauts when they occurred. And the last funeral I attended was Dave's. And so after the ceremony, there was a celebration of life for Dave. Got to meet a lot of his friends, people I've heard about. It was a very uplifting tribute to him. But at the end of the ceremony, it was very interesting because Dave's brother came up to me and he goes, "Ann, I have something I need to tell you." And I'm like, "Well, what?" He goes, "They found the watch." And I could not believe it. I figured working in that reconstruction hangar, we were also getting items that were flown in the crew compartment going to a private area. So in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, maybe the watch went in there, but I was just more really focused on the matter at hand, which was trying to, work my job. So when I found out he found the watch, or they had found the watch, it was very intriguing. So I told him that once he received it, to please send it to me. So about a month later, I got a call from Dave's brother and he goes, "Ann, I have the watch." I'm like, "FedEx it to me." Next slide, please. So here is a picture of the watch. You can see it was identified as a crew personnel item. It was just the face of the watch. And that what I found was interesting when I actually got a hold of it, that obviously the watch bands were gone. The crystal on the watch was completely shattered. You can kind of see a shard on the top left-hand corner. But the time of the watch, which was most intriguing, which was 9:07. 9:07 was the declared time of the accident, the declared time of which the orbiter broke up. And out of all the watches that were flown on the space shuttle for that mission, this was the only watch that was recovered. There were other watches recovered, but this was the only watch that was recovered that actually had the time of the accident correct. So there was some debate within the agency if this watch could be used as an investigation point. But because it was a personal item and it wasn't on the official crew manifest to be used as a part of the mission, they couldn't use it, which I was kind of glad because then I was able to get it back. Next slide, please. So this is more of just a more zoom in picture of the watch. And it was, like I said, it to have that time just encapsulated on that timepiece forever like that is, to me, humbling and incredible. I am very thankful for the individuals who found it. And ironically, a year later, I was able, by pure coincidence, able to meet that individual as well. But in the final slide here, this was what the watch should have looked like in its heyday. It was a beautiful watch then, but it has its own beauty now. So that is the story of my watch flying in space. A little bit different story, but it's a unique one that I like to share. And I would now like to open up the floor for any questions and answers.
Well, thank you, Anne, for that wonderful lecture and the touching personal story. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
And we could move on to the Q&A portion for this evening. And remember, as I explained earlier, we will do our traditional Q&A using Zoom's Q&A feature where you can type in your question. I'll then read the question to Anne. If you'd like to ask your question live to Anne, just raise your hand using Zoom's raise hand feature, and I'll unmute your microphone and you can ask the question. So let's see here. Let's see which questions we have already. So we've got a few hands that have been raised. So let's try this first. First, we're going to go to Mark Sarmiento. Let's give it a second, and we'll turn your microphone on. Mark, you're live now with Anne Miklos. You can ask your question.
Oh, hi, Anne.
Hi, Mark.
It was really nice to hear your story, and I'm very touched with the story. I've never heard anything like that before. But to make this question short, I would just like to know where is the watch now? Did you keep it somewhere, or do you still have it with you?
I have it with me.
Oh, that was so beautiful.
I have it with me. Yeah.
Right.
I have it with me. I'm holding it upside down, but yeah, I'm very honored to be able to still to have this and to be able to share it with you. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
It's
Thank you,
beautiful.
Mark. Okay. And all right, so next up, let's go to Jason Ileto. Jason has his hand raised. Jason, you're now live with Anne Miklos.
Hi, Anne. Thanks again for sharing your story. Much respect to you and everyone who's ever worked for NASA. I grew up living in Orlando, and I've every launch I would see from my backyard, and the flight path of the shuttle would always be right over my house, so I would hear every double boom. I was in college at the time of the accident, and I watched it. I remember it was a Saturday morning, and I just remember hearing about it on the news, and I was glued to the TV. And subsequently, I've been to the memorial in Arlington, and I just wanted to say, thank you for sharing your story. I remember when for the TPS damage that occurred,
Mhm.
I remember that, you know, they saw it happening during the launch, and I'm sure they were doing like a risk analysis, you know, as they were orbiting, and just, you know, like the decision process of like, do we try to attempt a landing, or, you know, was there ever like a second crew that would have been available to see if, you know, transfer the personnel to another, you know, is another OVA?
So to answer that question, there are a couple of things. We'll start with, was there a backup crew to go up? And that was not a part of the normal contingency for a NASA space flight. To have a space shuttle and a crew ready to go to rescue. That was a lesson learned after Columbia, for that all missions after Columbia went to the International Space Station. So they did have a safe haven, except for one mission, which was the final Hubble repair mission, in which at that time we did have a backup space shuttle already at the launch pad, just in case it needed to be used for a rescue mission. Fortunately, that didn't happen. So, but going back to the risk analysis, with that being said, that was the challenges with doing that type of analysis. You have to rely on the data that you had. There was, as you saw in that photograph, we really didn't have good imagery of what actually caused that, where that debris strike was. So that actually, there was a lot of debate within the agency of where that debris strike actually was, because depending on where it was would affect how the orbiter could enter into the Earth's atmosphere and take various heatings. The wing leading edge in the area that it was hit, where the foam did strike, was not the leading area that was considered in the analysis that the NASA engineers did in Houston. They were focusing more on the belly of the vehicle around the main landing gear, which is a different type of a thermal protection system. Those are actually tiles. So, so yes, there were bad decisions that were made. We all know the outcome. But in hindsight, the good news is we got flying again. And we know that that is something that those 7 crew members would have wanted us to do, is not to end the program. What their mission is to find out what happened, fix it, and get those vehicles flying again. And that's exactly what we did.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad you got to hear landings. Nice hearing some of that can relate to those twin sonic booms.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Next up, we have David Goldstein. David Goldstein has raised his hand, and I'm turning on his microphone. Hi, David, you're live with Ann Miklos. Can you unmute?
Hi, I didn't raise my hand, or if I did, it was an accident. Sorry.
Oh, all right, no problem. Do you want to ask a question, or should I mute?
Maybe move on. Maybe
okay,
move on.
all right.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, David. Okay. First time trying this audio Q&A, so apologies for the mix-up. But we have a lot of text questions as well. So why don't we go into some of our questions that our attendees are typing in. So Scott Devine, he asks, or he says, first, I didn't know about the first Omega on the moon malfunctioning. He asks, do you know what was wrong with Neil Armstrong's watch?
Oh, that's a good question. I do not. I tried doing a little bit of research in there, and I was unable to find more details into that particular malfunction. But if someone may know someone in Omega who may have some more of those details, it may be interesting to find out.
Okay. Next up, we'll go to Hyla Bauer. Hyla asks, was the watch working when it was found?
That's a good question. My initial thought was it was working because the face was so clear, but obviously it wasn't. It wasn't. And I have chosen just to keep the watch as is, not to open it up or try to move the hand pieces. For that, the significant value of it is just too precious the way it was found, and I don't want to disturb that. But it is interesting on the watch. Let's see if I can, I don't know if you can see it, but if I can get the glare right. Okay, is that good? You can actually see where the plastic casing, oops, if I can hold it without, the plastic casing was burnt on the back. That was still on the watch that got burnt as a part of the accident. So, yeah. So some things are meant to stay as is.
Okay, so next up, we have a question from Amalia Aquino. Amalia asks, where exactly was the watch found?
Oh my gosh, great question. So it was actually found in the area, it's called Hemphill, Texas. There were 2 towns in Texas where the majority of the debris was found. And I actually have, well, I don't have with me right now, but each piece of debris that was found, the latitude and longitude was found with, was noted with each debris piece. So by then you could take each debris piece with that latitude and longitude, and then knowing what that debris is, may it be a watch or a tile or whatever, you can begin to put a pattern together to find out how the vehicle broke apart. Fortunately, majority of the things that were in the crew cabin were found, I believe, in the Hemphill area. And but the actual shuttle debris field was almost the size, oh, I'm trying to think of Rhode Island. It was very large. It was very large. We had over 10,000 people that was a part of looking for all the debris of the orbiter. And 60% of the orbiter by weight was recovered.
Wow. Okay, next let's go back to some audio questions. Next up we have Melody Benlos. Melody, welcome. You are live with Ann Miklos.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me, Anne?
I sure can. Hi, Melody.
Hello, hello. I'm wondering if you remember me, because I first met you in 2019 at the Watches and Wonders event in Miami.
I do. Oh my gosh. Thanks for calling in.
Yes, I know it's been a while. I know we exchanged information, but you know, when I saw your name come up for today's, you know, for this month's lecture, I was just so happy, you know, and I truly thank you for sharing your story, you know, especially knowing how deeply personal it is, you know, but I'm so happy that you were able to come here tonight and share what you have. I'm just overjoyed. I don't really even have a question. I'm just so overjoyed and happy that you're giving this lecture. Thank you so much.
Oh, Melody, I appreciate that. And, always, I'm glad you remember that lecture from the Watches and Wonder. That was an event down in Miami where I first gave this presentation for those who may not have been a part of that. And that was a very unique venue. And of course that was pre-COVID. So it was very humbling to have about 30 people there, that a lot of them were watch people, obviously, and be able to share this with them and just get a different perspective of it. So I appreciate that. So, and I do remember our conversations, and I'm so glad you raised your hand so I could talk to you real time rather than by text.
I'll send you a text.
Okay.
Take care.
You too. Be safe.
Thank you, Melody. So just to continue on that, after Melody saw your lecture in Miami, she emailed me or texted me and let me know about what an excellent lecture you gave. And I said, okay, let me put you on the future lecture list. So here we are. So thank you, Melody, for making that happen. So next up, let's go to another audio question. We have Barbara McQuiston. Hi, Barbara, you're live with Ann Miklos. Barbara, can you hear us okay? If you can hear us, just unmute your microphone.
There we go.
There we go.
Hi,
Okay. Good to see you, Ann.
Hi, Barbara.
I want to say what's incredible is your personal story, and also the book that covers everything with regards to recovery too, because the watch is phenomenal that you have that and you recovered that, but being able to piece all the things together too, and that you and your team did at that time, and with the people on the ground that were volunteers that were helping you. I recommend that people take some more time and really pay attention to the story, because the whole thing is just phenomenal. So I'm glad to see you out here and people be able to hear what happened, because it's an incredible story all the way around. So.
It is. Thanks, Barbara. You're absolutely right. The book that she was referring to is Bringing Columbia Home. That was written by our launch director, Mike Leinbach, and Jonathan Ward. In the book, pretty much so doesn't really, it talks about, like Barbara said, from in more detail, what happened to Columbia, and then basically all the human stories, all the crazy things that everybody did, and very heroic things that people did in order to find all the pieces and to finally determine what happened. I am just a small piece in this huge field of team of people that helped understand what happened to the orbiter, and then to fix the problem. The watch is, in my mind, just a little bit of a happy story and something that was so tragic. So thanks, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, so next up we have a question that was submitted via email actually last week from Chris Herget. Chris, I see that you're tuned in. Do you, Chris, if you're still tuned in and if you'd like to ask the question live, just raise your hands. Otherwise, I'll read it out here. Okay, I'll read the question, because I think this is a very pertinent question today. Chris asks, what complications and design changes do you anticipate that we will see in the near future, mostly due to the Martian sol being approximately 40 minutes longer than an Earth day?
Yeah, and That is an excellent question, especially right after Percy's landing on Mars. And like he said, that like a Sol day is approximately 40 minutes longer than our average, than our Earth day. So the question comes then would be, then you would have to be able to design a watch that would be able to have, instead of a 24-hour period, to be able to have a watch that would be maintain the time for 24 hours and approximately 40 minutes for a full day. But I think the more concerning thing is that if when we do have humans on Mars, that things are always going to be run by mission control back on Earth. So I think the question then will be, which time will be used? Will we be using Earth time or the Sol Mars time? I guess I would say that we'd be following Earth time, but obviously you have to know the time on Mars as well. So a dual function watch would be pretty darn cool, my humble opinion. So
I agree.
yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to the audio questions. And how are you doing? We good to keep going?
Great. Yep,
Right.
keep on going, no problem.
Okay. So next up we have Keith Lobo. Keith, you're live with Ann Miklos.
Hi, Ann. Thank you for that incredible story.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I just wanted to say that, like many Americans, I've watched numerous space shuttle launches over the years. And I remember the very, very first launch. I was a young engineer in my first job on the West Coast. And I watched the shuttle go up, and I thought to myself, this could only happen in the United States. And the amazing thing is that I believe till today, we are probably the only nation in the world that has had a shuttle program with this type of re-entry vehicle flying up in the form of a rocket and coming back like a glider, like an airplane. But my question is a watch question for you. And I'm just curious about one very specific issue.
Mhm.
Let's watch a quartz movement or a mechanical movement. And if it is a mechanical movement, being up there in space for 17 days in the crew quarters, was your friend David winding the watch regularly, or was it in a sealed container? Can you share any of that information with us?
That's a very good question. So the watch was stowed the entire mission, so it never came out. It was kind of, think of it like in your luggage in an aircraft, it goes down below and it never gets seen until you land. Well, that was kind of the case in this case with the watch. It was stored in the mid deck, never to be back out until the shuttle landed again. The watch itself is a battery, it does have a battery, so the watch did not need to be wound, nor was it a solar watch, which of course, without seeing sun for 17 days, would probably stop charging as well. But this watch did have a battery, so I would like to say that it was working up until the time that that we lost the space shuttle. With looking at the warranty tag that came with the watch box, he bought it like not even a week before my birthday. And from the time for my birthday to that shuttle mission was about 8 months. So that was still well within, I think, that battery's lifetime. So I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Keith. All right, next up here, we have Matthew Soldo who'd like to ask a question. Hi, Matthew, you're live with Ann Miklos.
Hi, Ann. Thanks so much for the story.
Oh, you're welcome, Matt. Thanks
yeah.
for calling in.
I'd love to share a quick personal anecdote about the other shuttle tragedy. I was in 3rd grade when Challenger happened, and
oh my goodness,
like many school students remember watching it in TV, and our teacher, to make it a learning experience, had us write a letter to either a family member of one of the crew or a politician, and I chose to write a letter to President Reagan, and he was the only person of all the members of class who wrote back. And so I still have that letter. Well, my parents have that letter framed, and they won't give it to me because they're still very proud of it. But one day I hope to recover that. So it's lovely to see another memento like yours. My question, a quick question: do you ever put a strap on and wear that, watch, even though it's not telling the time? It's just a piece. No. But a more serious question. I'm curious your take. I think you mentioned the current mission on Mars, and as a space enthusiast, it's been amazing seeing all these robotic missions and how much progress we're making. And so, what's curious your take on when is it that the robots aren't sufficient, where we need live human astronauts to be, boots on soil on the moon or other planets?
Well, that excellent question, and I love the Reagan letter. Oh my gosh, that's an incredible story there. But so I'm going to kind of work up to the answer, and I wanted to say that with all the Mars missions that we've had so far, they're all had different mission objectives. Percy, that just landed on Mars, the objective of this rover is to actually find former life on Mars. So it's equipped with that type of scientific data to be able to take core samples, and with the instrumentation that's on that rover, to be able to tell if there are past life forms on there. So with that being said, there's also a weather station on there to better understand the weather on Mars, as well as there's also a little helicopter that is on there as well, to be able to understand the aerodynamics of actually flying a rotor on Mars. So the point is that each rover that comes up is providing different data, so that when we do have the capabilities of putting a man on Mars, we'll better know that surrounding what Mars actually is, from a physical and more of a biological standpoint. One of the main hurdles that's still a challenge is landing on Mars, because Mars, of course, doesn't have the atmosphere as Earth does to slow down a spacecraft when it enters into an atmosphere. Since Mars's atmosphere is much thinner than Earth's, that it doesn't have that capability of slowing the spacecraft down. Therefore, the spacecraft has to slow itself down. So, and when I'm saying slow down, you're going from 20,000 miles per hour, to a landing speed. And if you watch the Mars landing, you saw that there were parachutes involved, and then a sky crane that lowered the spacecraft down to the Mars surface. And think of that spacecraft the size of a Mini Cooper, maybe a little bit smaller. So it does have some weight to it. But if you're going to send humans to Mars and have all the equipment that you need to I always say, go to Mars, which is like a big camping trip. Not only bring your own food, bring your own air, bring your own water. And I mean, you have to have everything there. So it's going to take multiple trips in order to even get set up to have human on Mars. And then once you do, then it's how you deal with radiation, which is a whole nother conversation. But in my mind, what is the purpose of having humans on Mars as compared to a rover? You're having a human on Mars. I mean, there's always a certain aspect of human space flight for that ability to find and go beyond where we haven't been before. And Mars is one of those type of frontiers. It's going to be very dangerous. You may not get everybody back that you send out, but I know there are a lot of people that have their hands raised that are ready to go when we have the technology and with the safety behind it to go ahead and do so.
Thank you. That's a great explanation.
Thank you, Matthew. So let's go to a text question. This question is relating to your job. Nick Bowman asks, after a successful mission, are all the insulation tiles typically removed and then replaced?
Oh my gosh. Good question. Thankfully, no. There on Columbia, there were over, oh my gosh, 25,000 tiles on the shuttle, plus other forms of thermal protection. And the tiles actually had a life of 100 missions. So each tile, all the tiles had a certain criteria that kind of like a go, no go gate. If they got damaged, we could do repairs, but if the damages were so big, then we'd have to remove and replace the tile. So after each space flight, we would come in and inspect all the tiles on the vehicle to ensure that everything was in the proper design and configuration to be safe for the next space flight. So that was a part of our maintenance we did when we get once we get an orbiter back, we would do that in preparation for the next flight. And that could take 3 to 4 months, depending on any complications that we may find. But keep in mind too, that the thermal protection system was one out of about 34 other systems that were in the space shuttle that all had to have their own set of inspections done to ensure that everything had worked and nothing got damaged with that flight, as well as taking the old payload out and putting a new payload in and reconfiguring the crew cabin. So very detail oriented, but it was something that was a good process, and it was always fun to be able to go out and see the orbiter every day and help get those tiles repaired.
Great. Well, how about maybe two or three more questions? We've got a lot coming in here. Let's go to an audio question from Justin Lotzbaum. Hi, Justin. You're live with Ann Miklos.
Hi, Ann. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Justin. How you doing?
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your story. It was just a fantastic story. Human space flight is something that's near and dear to my heart. I recently retired out of Vandenberg Air Force Base, and I had the distinct pleasure and honor of serving with the former astronaut Susan Helms.
Yes.
She's a tremendous human being, and it was fascinating to listen to her stories and actually be in the same room with her. Unfortunately, at the time, I was not as much of a timepiece enthusiast, and so I never paid attention to what was on her wrist, which kind of leads into my question of, is there a specific brand that astronauts prefer, or does NASA issue watches now? Or again, like, is there a go-to for the astronauts?
So to my understanding, NASA does not issue watches for the shuttle program. To my understanding, NASA does not issue, like, let's put it this way, standard watches. Now for the 107 crew, Dave's crew, they had timepieces that they all wore, but mainly those were for timers for the experiments they were doing. And so they all had central timepieces for that. So that was more mission specific. And then if you're doing a spacewalk, the only official watch that NASA still has is the Omega Speedmaster, which is, like I had mentioned, was the one watch that's still certified to do a spacewalk. But to my understanding, to have, normally what you will see in the pictures, what I've understood is that the crew will just wear a watch, their personal watch, when they're doing that space flight. But there is no Pacific like watch that every single astronaut that's flown on the shuttle program has the same watch.
Longest spacewalk in history.
Yeah.
Assuming she has an Omega.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
That's the main watch. Omega is to me the gold standard of what a space watch should be. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Justin. Okay, let's go for two more questions. Next up, we have Charlie Flores. Hi, Charlie. You're live with Ann Miklos. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Charlie.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, my question is more for preservation of the historic watch that you own. And the question is, did you remove the battery from the watch? Because as that battery ages, it will leak and destroy the internal components of the watch. And since the watch does have an historic importance, it may be important to try to keep it pristine as possible.
Wow. That very good consideration. No, the battery has not been taken out. I do have contacts within the Trudeau technical factory, I guess, in Long Island City. So that may be a possibility for them. I think I would let anybody do something like that. I think I would leave it to that team.
Yes, that is a good team, because I actually did some apprenticeship in there, minor at that facility. So they're very capable probably of handling it. The basically would be just to open the watch carefully and remove the battery so that it doesn't leak into the mechanism, because it will destroy the mechanism, since that is my my forte is repairing watches, and I repair mechanical and electronic watches, and the batteries do a tremendous amount of damage inside. So that was my only concern.
I so appreciate you bringing that up and taking your expertise and applying it to me, because I certainly wouldn't want anything to happen. I would like to take any precaution to preserve the watch as it is. And if it's something as simple to taking the watch out, I think I will be contacting those folks and having them go ahead and take care of that.
Yeah, there would be no change to the watch either. It'd just be open to take the battery out, and that should be it. Thank you very much for your story. It was wonderful. Really an emotional time for you in many respects. So I thank you again for sharing that with us.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for your bit of advice as well. That is deeply appreciative. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Charlie. It's great to hear Charlie's voice. He's a longtime HSNY member, so thank you, Charlie. Appreciate that. Okay, so next question. Let's go. This will be our last question for the evening. Let's go to Sean Thomas. Hi, Sean. You're live with Ann Miklos.
Hello, Ann. It's an honor to speak to you, and it was great hearing your story. So this is a question coming from the watch nerd side of me.
Okay.
And for many watch fans. So the Omega Speedmaster, very famous in the watch community, but it is also kind of infamously only 50 meters water resistant. It is an unconfirmed rumor that NASA did not want the water resistance of the watch any higher than 50 meters due to the possibility of the crystal of the watch popping off or dislodging when going into the vacuum of space. Do you have any comment on that? Is that true? Is it not? Or
oh my gosh, Sean, that I'd have to do some research on that. That is an excellent question. And I would have to get back with you to give you that proper answer, because that's the first time I've heard that type of comment. So I will, if I may, I'd like to do a little bit of research and see if I can get a better answer for you.
That would be awesome, because it's always a pet peeve for the watch collectors. Like, oh darn, because it's a standard of 100 meters of water resistance. That's a good everyday watch.
Sure.
The 50s is always a little letdown, and there's this rumor that's been circulating for years about how it's only 50, and that NASA had a reason. But it'd be great. That'd be great to hear back.
All right, I'm making a note. Okay.
Well, thank you, Sean. Yeah, we'll get you both in touch and see if Ann can research that. Appreciate the question, Sean. And I appreciate everyone who tuned in tonight, everyone who asked a question tonight. And I want to thank Ann again for this wonderful lecture, this touching personal story. We really appreciate you coming to lecture at the Horological Society of New York, all the way up from your orbit around planet Earth right now. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. It's been an honor to talk with everyone, and I enjoyed all the questions as much as I hope you enjoyed my story, and especially the advice. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And I hope maybe to see you folks in live at one point as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that. Thank you, Ann. Thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. We'll see you back here next month, and have a great night. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.